And we are live. Good evening, everyone. My name is LaShade Scott. I am the president and CEO of Scott Center for Observation, Treatment, and Transition. Tonight's segment is in collaboration with Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Good Health Wins, where we acknowledge the importance of immunization. Tonight's segment, we're going to focus on bridging the gap from awareness to action. And it is with immense pleasure to introduce my panel tonight. For starters, we have Ohio State Senator Paula Hicks-Hudson, who's been dedicated to empowering and assisting individuals in improving their quality of life. She was Toledo's first Black mayor and presently represents Ohio's 11th district. Everyone welcome her. I have... Thank you for coming tonight. I have the pleasure of introducing my mentor, Annie J. Ross-Womack. She's Executive Director for Sickle Cell Disease Association and Ohio Sickle Cell and Health Association, Incorporated, a statewide nonprofit providing education, advocacy, and support to individuals and families affected by sickle cell disease for over 60 years. She advocates for families, neighborhoods, small businesses, and civil rights while serving the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America, Leadership Council, Columbus NAACP, Northeast Area Commission, along with 1,000,001 other initiatives. And I'm always dragging her in to do whatever it is that I want her to do. So I am happy to have you tonight on this
voluntold people. Voluntold.
Pretty much. And then we will have Heather Avant. She will be joining us later, but she is an impressive sickle cell warrior, advocate, photographer, painter, crafter, an all-around do-it-yourselfer who made a name for herself in Dallas, Texas with her husband, Jason, and her son, Jett. So she is actually getting off a flight. So she will join us she will join the call momentarily. So I just wanted to introduce her. So as we, like I said, welcome ladies. Thank you. Tonight we're going to address some barriers and gaps or some ways that we can implement advocacy here in the state of Ohio, but in general, how we can get the advocacy to in sickle cell out with legislators such as yourself. But before we kind of go into our talk, I really just want to let the audience know I am so appreciative of Senator Paula Hicks because she personally reached out to me here in Ohio to see how she can help raise awareness on sickle cell, how she's able to learn and see where the needs need to be met. So I appreciate you, and I wanted to give you your flowers publicly because most legislators or people that's in legislation, they're not always reaching out. So I wanted to let the audience know that you are here because you want to be here and that you took the initiative to see how you can be, of service for individuals impacted by sickle cell disease.
I thank you so much for those kind words. It's something that is near and dear to my heart. Just the fact that in our communities we have so many challenges, and health, which is a God-given right, should not be one that we have to keep fighting for. And sickle cell in particular, which is so, it's such connected to us as a people, we have to, be educated. And that's one of the things I see my job to do is not only to advocate, but to educate our folks so that if I'm not in the seat, the next person who's in the seat won't have to relearn, or learn what I had to learn in order to move this needle forward. So thank you so much for those kind words. But I think that's what we all are supposed to do.
Yes, thank you. I see we have one of our hematologists here in the Toledo area, Dr. Crawford Strunk. Thanks. We're happy that you're here to watch what's going on here. And audience, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and I will be able to ask our panel those questions. So let's go ahead and move forward with today's conversation. Annie, what kind of made you get into sickle cell?
That's funny. When you have people in your family that have sickle cell disease, it's a given. And you see the system, how it um truly treated people unfairly, especially our men with sickle cell disease as they aged out, and how they were treated not only in emergency rooms, but just in the public because of their weakened state or condition. There were a lot of stereotypes attached to men with sickle cell disease. They didn't know that they had sickle cell disease, and you can't work, you're lazy. It's just hard to see just the breakdown of the men, the older men in my family who had sickle cell. And then when I had, and then fast forward, my son, he has trait, have a granddaughter with trait. My niece had sickle cell. When I say had, it's because she received the bone marrow transplantation at an early age, and she no longer has sickle cell disease, but she does have the trait because she got her match from her sister, who was her full match or her complete match when they were doing it then. So I mean, when you have people in your family that have different conditions, you're already in it, and then you learn to advocate, and you learn to educate folk on what is true at an early age. It's not contagious, it's not just us, it's not, they're not drug seekers. So you learn the lingo and the language, because you're walking in those shoes.
Overall. So to push forward with this, we know that sickle cell, the Black Panthers at one point were going around knocking door to door, asking individuals their or if they wanted to know their status and things of that sort. Here it is, we're 2023, and it feels like the cycle is trying to repeat itself. Now we have to re-educate our community where Black Panthers was doing that. Now we have to re-educate our community. And now that we have Senator Paula Hicks on this call, as she stated, she wanted to move this needle. How do we go about informing our legislators, or how, and this can be, you guys can answer from both of your own perspectives, but how do we as a community, one, get people more engaged, and how do we take these problems from a local level up? How do we do that?
Well, I know that the good thing about the state of Ohio is that because we are quasi in the budget under the newborn screening category, and funding is allocated for grants that both our programs receive on another level on different other initiatives. I know that I receive a Ohio Department of Health grant that the funding comes from the newborn screening dollars, and that's in that line item of that budget. But we send this, when I say we, the state sickle cell project sends a legislative report to our legislators every year. So the onus then is up on some of our legislators. I know a lot of legislators that have come and gone in the Ohio Senate and over in the House, and and it's like, oh yeah, I saw it, I didn't read it, and then they try to read up on it real quick when I'm coming to give testimony, or when I call, because I am also on the Ohio Rare Disease Council. So I was appointed by one of the senators, and so I sit on that as well with several legislators. We have a new legislator that coming in when one left, and so it's always a re-education, as you will. But they get a legislative report every year. They can call the health department to give testimony every year, so it's very different. So the materials and the tools are there to be educated on what the projects do across the state, and actually some of the numbers that are projected. So, and I think one of the other things is that we have to show up. And when I say we, people have to go to sessions. I know I go to sessions, and I'm at a disadvantage because sometimes I'm the only brown person in a health session or in a meeting or in the different meetings. And so everybody, they say, hey, Annie. And I'm like, oh, okay. But I'm the only one there. And so it's because everything is legislated. I mean, everything is legislated. There's a law, there's a bill, there's a tax, there's a something. So all of that stems from our House and Senate and the different laws and bills that are read. And it's just sad to see how many people that look like us do not go to any of the Senate information or the House information. They don't lobby, they don't go, they don't even know where the buildings are. They remember going for a high school field trip. So that's our house. Those are our houses. We put people in there and we need to go and monitor what they're doing.
And from my perspective, all that is absolutely correct. That because of term limits and because of, especially for those in the minority caucus, and I'm not talking racial minority caucus, but for me, there's 7 Democrats in the Senate. And so a lot of our time is running back and forth between different committees. But one of the things that I think can really help legislators is not just talk to, to the legislators that look like us, but really to educate those folks across the board. And I'm sure that you're doing just that. But one person really can't do it by themselves. So there has to be this, what I think is a broader network, like how you and I have reached out, Lachey, and we're hopefully working together to within our community and in my district to raise that awareness. And one of the things that I've always said is that not even during the times of budget or during the times when a bill is or the issue is before the legislature, but stop in to say, hey, do you know this is what we're doing? Or send, like how we've been sending information back and forth that helps to remind us and educate us, because it is so many different things that get in the way of us doing what we need to do to be educated. Because, you were talking about this report, and I'm thinking, as you're talking about it, have I read that report? Because I'm one of those people that will take those things home and read all over the place. But you get bombarded with a lot of information. But it's really important that and I always say this, you're the experts. I'm not the expert, and I need the experts to educate me so I can advocate for you. Right now, we're in the budget process, and I'm glad to know that sickle cell is part of the rare disease commission, or whatever it's called. And that was a struggle to get that put together, to get folks to agree to even to impanel that and empower that to go down that road. So it's really important that it is a true partnership. With a true partnership, sometimes one partner is able to carry 75% of the load and the other person only can do 25%, and then it can switch around. But it's important that you stay within that partnership so that we can get it over the finish line. Because I think we do need to raise the awareness and to keep that awareness in front of not only the legislature, but also the Ohio Department of Health, as well as the governor, because I always say that it is the executive branch that will execute the laws that the legislative branch will pass. And if we don't have someone in the executive branch really pushing, and we've got a strong advocate within the minority health office, but it's the Ohio Department of Health, which is doing its thing. And sometimes I worry about whether or not they really focus on those issues that affect Black folks in the state of Ohio.
Yes, those were all great. Excuse me. Great responses to the question. I see that our warrior Heather Avant has joined us. I've already introduced you to our audience. I told them that you were going to be a little late because of your flight. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for your patience. It was a bit of a scramble getting here this evening. I just flew in from DC, actually presenting on the Cure Sickle Cell Initiative and changing therapies and fertilization and reproductive health. So it's definitely a pleasure to be here with you all, ladies, this evening.
No, thank you. So here we have Ohio Senator Paula Hicks-Hudson, and I'm pretty sure you may have heard of Annie J. Ross-Womack. She's a pretty big deal for SCDAA. I might be biased because she's my mentor, but she's a pretty big deal. She always sits at a lot of tables. But basically, I just want you to kind of give the audience a little bit of your perspective on what it's like living with sickle cell and how are you thriving and surviving at this point.
Day by day, one step at a time. Living with sickle cell, as we all know, is a challenge. I think that's not a secret, right? Having sickle cell is definitely it is unique into itself, and I think that there's not a single warrior out there who wouldn't say as such. And as warriors, we all live so differently. So I hate to put my story on to someone else and say, this is how we all are, because that will never be the truth. And I have two siblings, one who was adopted who has sickle cell, and also a brother who has sickle cell as well. So I'm not the only warrior in my family, and we have all experienced this journey completely different. Me, I am the go-getter. I want to see the world fixed and change it. I want it to happen yesterday. My brother is more like, let it go, let it flow. Sure. Should I take that medicine, and he's the one who's calling me up. And my sister is like, I could care less, really. Just like make sure I'm not in pain. That's all I want. So, I think that the journey is very different. For me, living with sickle cell, though, I'm a mommy and I'm a wife. And so it's a challenge, right? Some days there are really rough days. Some days there are painful days. And you still have to put one foot down on the ground and get out of the bed and take care of your family. Life doesn't stop because of sickle cell. Hospitalizations don't stop either. And fortunately for me, I am not in the hospital very often. I'm so blessed. But I take very good care of myself, and I do all the things I can possibly do to keep myself out of the hospital. I think people think I'm a little anal about how I do it. I was in a meeting just in DC yesterday, and I had on 5 layers of clothes because we were in an air-conditioned building, and they were like, "You're not serious," and I'm like, "Oh no, I'm legit serious. Like I'm like pulling off layers. I mean, even right now on a plane, I have on like what you see is 3, but I'm pretty sure I have on 6 layers of clothing just to get on an airplane. So I think, how I do sickle cell is just completely, I think it's just completely unique to me because it works for me. But as a sickle cell patient, I'm proud to be a sickle cell patient. I think that, I always tell my mom, God put me in this space for a reason. I often, don't get me wrong, sometimes I hate my body and I'm like, okay, God, when you going to be fair? Let's play fair. Because we are cheating right now. I don't know who's cheating, but it's not me. Can I get the cheat codes? Because this is a little bit much. But sickle cell is a lot. There's so many components to it, and that's not just considered the pain. Yeah, pain is a big deal, right? Especially as an aging sickle cell warrior. I'm in my 40s now. And when I was in my 20s, I had pain, but I could have cared. I was like, let me go out with my friends and be cute, And now as a 40-year-old, I'm like, I probably should have took my behind home. So it changes things as you've gotten older, You're like, okay. So I may be paying for some of those decisions that I made when I was in my 20s, now that I'm in my 40s. But I can tell you that pain isn't the only thing, right? Because we all know sickle cell is progressive, and our problem is how are we slowing the progression of the things that are happening to our bodies as we get older? It's so funny. My doctor tells me that I'm the only one of her patients. She said, I scare her to death. She's like, girl, you scare me. I will send a text message like, hey, can you order me a chest CT? And she's like, what? Like, what are you? I'm sorry. You need a what now? She's like, I'm gonna meet you in the back of the hospital because why are you asking for a chest CT? She's like, you scare me, but I'm the kind of person who I don't want to go to the hospital or see a doctor or anyone unless it's like dire. For me, it's like something has to really be wrong. And sometimes I just want to make sure that I'm okay. And so I find myself just calling her up and being like, hey, can you just do a 1-2, just listen to my lungs real quick? Because I also wonder sometimes if I'm a hypochondriac. A lot of times I'm not, more often than not. She's like, I'm gonna need you to go to the ED and admit yourself. I will meet you down there because you ain't right. Like, this is not right. You're not okay. This is not okay. This is, you're sick. Go to the ED. But I oftentimes, we joke, my husband always says, you have this amazing sense of humor about your sickle cell, because I feel like I have to have levity about something that's very heavy, because if you don't have levity and there's no light, then all you have is darkness and heaviness. And I do not live my life that way. I am a big jokester. I joke all the way until they tell me I have to be admitted. And then it gets real, with the tears and the like, oh, you're not kidding. You better steal my days from me. So then it changes. But I just have I think I have a very different, unique outlook on sickle cell. And I think the reason why is because I had a brother with it and I saw him go through it. And I have a little sister with it and I saw her journey. And I knew that my journey was to figure out a way to fix this. How do we make this better? And even if it's making it better in one person, if I can solve this problem in one human, I can see one human do better than I have, or have more successful interactions with medical professionals than I have, or have a better time at the hospital than I have by mounds succeeded. So that's a little brief overview of how I look at sickle cell in my life.
No, that's great. I don't know if you kind of know my story a little bit, but I have 2 warriors here myself, and they're 8 and soon to be 7. So to hear you say, because you had someone who else was dealing with some of the things that you're dealing with, it kind of made, said way for you to just make light of the situation. So it makes me feel better as a parent to know that they have each other and they can get through that together. So to hear you say
really morbid jokes come out though. So just be prepared as they get a little older that we throw around. My brother and I think we scare my mom sometimes because we have bad jokes and, so my mom's like, I do not say that. Jesus, she clasped her pearls like, my grown kids, because we talk about death. And so it gets really morbid because I think sickle cell, and I know this to be true, most sickle cell patients have a very unique relationship with death and dying, the way we understand it, because it's been presented to us since we were very little, that the way we think about it is completely different. So oftentimes my brother and I have some really wanky jokes. My mom doesn't really appreciate, but it's keeping it light. But it's also, we have very separate journeys, because he couldn't live my sickle journey with me as well as I couldn't live his sickle journey with him. So our journeys are very different because we're very different people. I guarantee you, if you had him on this and you asked him about his experiences, my mouth probably would fall open because I'd be like, oh, really? Like, I didn't know, dude. Like, I'm sorry, and I think he would do the same for me because we talk. But there's just that different dynamic. He's a man going through this, and I'm a woman going through this. And like my sister, like I said, she has a completely different host of problems. And so she's going through it differently. I think she's a little closer towards me on that woman spectrum. She kind of gets me a little bit better when we talk about it. But it's a very interesting kind of dichotomy of growing up with a sibling. Sometimes there's that sibling rivalry. Like, I was out of the hospital for the last 4 years. How long have you made it out? Oh, you were in last month? I win. It's really weird things to have a rivalry over, but yeah.
So I had mentioned earlier before you had got on that Senator Paula Hicks-Hudson had reached out to me personally and wanted to get involved with sickle cell. And I thought that was very noble of her to really just wanted to have an understanding of like what sickle cell is and how she can, pay it forward or how she's able to help us in this particular community. So with that being said, I would kind of like for you and Annie to kind of let her know some of the misconceptions of sickle cell and maybe some of the stigmas that come with sickle cell, just so that she has a little bit more understanding of like what this population deals with on a consistent basis.
And what can we do to help move the information along so that we can get rid of some of these misconceptions that become barriers, because as Annie was talking before you got on about, they think that men that have sickle cell, that they're lazy or they're this or they're on drugs or blah, 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 whatever. But what is missing to me, why I'm here is I want to know what's really missing that we can maybe fill that gap to help those who suffer, not, I won't say suffer, because I really like that term, warriors, that you're fighting each and every day about it.
Well, I mean, I think, there needs to be some change from the top down. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and I understand, when you're sitting in the emergency room with our warriors, and you know, they've learned, a lot of warriors have learned how to cope, and it's just like she had me at Miss Avant, she just had me going, how you just sit there and you joke because you learn, and then they look over, oh, you must not be in any pain. We're just not going to come because you're over there joking and laughing, or you're holding a conversation. You can't possibly be on level 37. Well, you don't know. I'm on level 50, but I've learned how to, try to deal something. And I think something came out of the meeting we had last night, that one of our older women that were in the struggle that helped start support groups in Toledo, the first support group actually in the 70s. And she was saying that when they went, they would go to the hospital in groups, and they would sit there with folk, and they would have these conversations, and they would talk, and, try to kind of get their mind off of their pain to try to have that community. But as soon as they took the person to the back by themselves, they were lonely and isolated. No one was talking. They were waiting in the room. And then she said when she was allowed to go back, they were at the stage they were when they first got there. They were back in that pain state, or that state of, despair. And, I don't think that the healthcare providers really understand how much damage they are doing, because it doesn't affect them. And and I think what COVID did, what it kind of shined the light, so everybody was in this thing like, oh, now remember that movie, A Boy in a Plastic Bubble? And we used to laugh and say, nobody can be allergic to everything at the same time. No kid can be allergic to dirt and this. But then when COVID came, it was like, oh, I understand how folks with rare or genetic conditions, I understand what they're kind of understand. I'm a little more, empathetic, sympathetic, or whatever. Because I had to stay in, or somebody in my family died, or wow, I understand, not wanting to go to the hospital until, I'm coughing up that lung, because I don't have a job now, and I'm on welfare now, or I'm on Medicaid now because I lost my job, and I'm sitting over here. And I think it became a great equalizer. But I don't think that medical professionals really understand the harm they are doing. They coddle a person when they are an infant, and then as that young man or that woman grow, then the young men become threats, and it's the same little baby. Look at curly hair Jason, and then they grow, and then it's like they're grown men now, and they don't know how to address what's the same person that you just saw 2 years ago at the pediatric setting. And when you go to the adult setting, you got all these different rules, because he's telling you, you've taught him how to be independent. You've taught him how to know his levels. You taught him how to tell you what he needs. And then when he gets to the adult side and he says, well, I need this, you're looking at him like, what do you mean? And I think that there's no continuity of care as folks transition, and our medical professionals, some of them really don't care. I mean, for lack of a better word, and we use these terms, social determinants of health, but our systems are built on this racist, classist system, and they're built on a hospitalization service system, and they're not servicing folk the way that they should. It's not a service of care. You just go and you're a number, and it's a hospital numbering system. And so until we get professionals who really care about the folk that they're serving, we're going to continue to have this same problem that we've had since the 60s, since 100 years. At first it was a curious thing. We were curious things to folk. And it was like, how do they function? How do they work? Like, let's look at it. And then it was like, oh, it's too many curious things. And so, and it's like, well, we didn't ask to be brought here. So that's kind of how you prove like, it wasn't over here. Curious things. We gotta just look at people and what is that?
I hate to interject, but I think that what you have said is is profound, right? It's the beginning. And what you're asking for is the top down, right? So what we're saying is what's needed is comprehensive sickle cell centers. I mean, that's across the board. That's what we need. That's what every state needs. A place where if I look on my map, I can say if I'm in, because for me, I travel a lot as a warrior. I mean, I'm blessed to travel, but it is I have a rule. If I get sick in a different state, I will figure out how to get back to Texas, because that's where my medical team is, because those are the people who I trust. But wouldn't it be, how profound would it be to have a sickle cell center? They don't have to be massive, right? We're talking about smaller centers, but they're catering to care towards sickle cell patients. That's what's needed, especially in our state, where in areas where we have our Black and brown people, because that's where sickle cell is. There's no doubt about it. So comprehensive care, offering, psychologists, social workers, and nutritionists, people who are really there to work fundamentally on sickle cell patients and that transition age, right? Because that's when we're losing that's where Ms. Ross just said it, that's where we're losing our people. That's where our babies and our children and our young people are dying. The amount of people who die in that age range is staggering. 18 to 22 is that transition age. So from pediatrics to adult care, that's when sickle cell patients die. And they die because they're treated, and you're being treated like babies, and you're having your hand held, and they're taking care of you, and they're doing all the things to make sure that you're well, to adult care where you're being told that, excuse me, they don't believe you, and we don't trust you. And why are you using your cell phone as a distraction technique? Why are you hanging out with your friends? Why are you laughing as a distraction technique? And we say, because we're laughing so that we're not crying. Pediatric care for sickle cell patients is amazing. I think many of us have had great care. I mean, I'm not saying that there are not gaps. Don't get me wrong. We can always do better. But I remember when I was in pediatrics having the same nurse for 12 years. Every time I was in the hospital, that same person, and she took care of me. And when she wasn't working, I used to be like, I was a hot mess, because this was my nurse, She knew my meds. She knew how to calm me down. She knew how I got my meds. She knew how I would respond to my meds. She knew if I was overly medicated. She knew all the things. And then she knew, when they would, the people come in and say, well, you got to do your homework. And she was like, you just dosed her with morphine. You think she's doing homework? I had someone there as an advocate, and when my mom couldn't be. But there's not that same system doesn't live. So with comprehensive cancer centers, like how they have comprehensive cancer centers, comprehensive medical centers for other diseases, why can't they have that? Because sickle cell is such a complex disease, right? It affects you from the time you're born to the time you die. And it affects every part of you. So every single organ, every single bone, everywhere blood flows, we are affected by sickle cell. So having something comprehensive like that, having comprehensive information that's released. I know the NIH is doing a lot with releasing information, as well as ASH. There's a group at the National Human Genome Research Institute. They're doing information. They're releasing information that's not marked by any one facility. It's basically, so it could be used everywhere. How do we get those guidelines? How do we get the ASH guidelines out that say this is how sickle cell is treated? How do we make those things not I could use it, but I have no choice but to use it. How do we make those things law when it comes to treating sickle cell patients?
So I just introduced legislation, bipartisan legislation for doulas to receive Medicaid funding from prenatal to postpartum. And this has been a struggle for such a long time. And what that doula does is exactly what you're saying about having someone with the warrior to help advocate, and not only so when the warrior goes back to the room for whatever they do, the person can go with them. It's like, it's almost like a community health worker, so to speak, but someone who is trained in understanding what, the challenges of sickle cell and all the things that you're telling me. I mean, this is something that we need to address and be very targeted, because I see a lot of the legislation, a lot of stuff that we do at the state is real generic, and and it doesn't hone in and get really into the nitty gritty about what's needed for this particular disease. And so, Annie, you got a good friend, so you better come to my office.
Oh, I'll be at your office, because I go up and I see my favorite Senator Craig all the time, only because he's been there on both sides, and then he's one of the long-standing persons up in there. So I'm gonna come, and then I visit, and I have to visit people that the Hoffman brothers, because they're it is what it is. But I think one of the things that we definitely need to touch on is the fact that, about 20 years ago, when the Millers were in, Ray and the other Millers, they introduced before there were at the same time when they introduced the Commission on Minority Health, Miss Mildred, when they got in there, they introduced adult comprehensive sickle cell clinics, and it was shot down. They introduced a separate funding because people were living longer, because currently right now the only funding that every person in Ohio has comes from the newborn screening dollars. And technically that is for notification to the families, the initial consultation, and then some follow-up. So we talked about the lifespan dollars. Our state does not pay lifespan dollars. They have it in Michigan, they have it in other states, where a person with sickle cell can get lifespan dollars to cover them for the lifespan. You have to, have 1 foot in the grave before your disability is approved. Now we have all these major systems, that are legislated, Ohio Department of Medicaid, Medicare. I mean, we had to fight to get the medicine off of the OTC. Oh, we got to find an over-the-counter equivalent. We only have 3 FDA-approved medications for sickle cell. There are no OTC equivalents. So, I mean, it's just been this whole dog and pony show of how it's treated. And it is because when you go in and then you have to say, always, I get this question all the time when I'm walking the halls. Oh, so it's just Black people. And it's like, excuse me? And, excuse me. And so then you have to do this whole re-education for them even to listen. So now what we do is we take multicultural families down there, and they're like, oh, that person over there with the green eyes, they have sickle cell? Yes, they do.
Yeah.
That person over there, yes, they do. Because you have to, and the reason we are not funded is because for years, it's a Black disease. It's a Black disease. It's a Black disease. And so we know what that is. And, it's now, well, I won't say now because we're coming off of the mountain experience, as Dr. King would say. We were the flavor of the month. I could get anything, a couple months ago, until we just had those couple votes downtown about, the critical race theory and House Bill 135 and all these other things that are going on. It was okay to be Black. It was fast to be Black. People bringing out their Black relatives out of the closet. My aunt's Black. Everything was good, when they was trying to, swell the peace. So I guess we're going back to normal. That happened, but we can't talk about it in schools. And we're not even with the House bill, with the, copay accumulators, all these barriers that are up against families. We were meeting with the Ohio Department of, education people, insurance folk. We're talking about pre-existing conditions that they clearly said they were going to take off the list, but it's still not taken off. So, everybody's fighting an uphill battle when it's something that a person didn't ask for. It's a genetic condition. So it's not like, oh, it's contagious. It's genetic. This is not the Commission on Minority Health that deals with preventable things. This is not something like that. It's not going to go away. This is not diabetes. This is not high blood pressure. This is not asthma and bronchitis. Those things are preventable. They go away. And so we've been asking for a separate line item funding under the commission since they signed on about 3 years ago to start talking about sickle cell, because it was not on their radar either, because they deal with preventable conditions. And so it's genetic. And so we've always been under the genetic department. And I want to say that our organization is the one that got it there. I mean, I have to fight every day with other conditions talking about why you guys get money. Because if it wasn't for the Black people, there wouldn't be a whole newborn screening panel that funds not only the lab, but sickle cell and then some other ones. So we're one of the only ones, and we have to raise the price of that insurance thing so we can get more money, because we get a set price. And there's not that many other disease states that are even written into that line item. And then when they come in, they're going to have to get somebody else's money because they're not getting ours.
Right. And see, now is the time. Now is the time to do it while all these federal ARPA dollars are there. I mean, I'm glad we're having this conversation today, right now, but I'm kind of sad a little bit because, the House has, I believe that they've got I don't know if the budget has come out from them, but I'm looking at the comp doc to see where things are. And I'm going to at least start the conversation about, because part of my my bag to come to Columbus is about healthcare, because in Lucas County we have some of the worst outcomes of health, and it's not just related to race; it's just all over the board. That's why I started with the whole thing about maternal and infant health, because we have babies and moms dying up here unnecessarily. And then, this part is also important. If we don't champion it, who will? And as you were talking, I was thinking about, the saying that, a rising tide lifts all boats. So, Black folks have been that tide for a long time. So we just need to keep on rising these boats and getting what we need, but being really targeted. So I'm going to go back and pull and see if I can find the stuff that, as you call them, the Miller brothers did, and to begin that conversation.
I can send it to LaSharday, and I can send it to you. I mean, I have because we've been part of every sickle cell. When I say we, the organization, because long before there was an ODH department of sickle cell services, we were the first ones to receive the funding under the Eisenhower dollars for the Crippled Children's Act. So we managed all the funding. OSHA managed all the funding. So before centers were caught up into hospitals, before there was a HIPAA, Head Start and Black Panthers. I mean, the lady who helped start this organization still works here, and she was one that went door to door with the Head Start program and the Black Panthers, testing little children and doing the band research. So we have a rich history of grassroots on the ground and making sure that, we hold people accountable. So if I'm not saying you, I just met you. I believe everything.
No, look, I take it off. I do what I do and I take what I take. I just want to know a little bit more about, because I think there was a question about how a sickle cell is not considered a pre-existing condition. I mean, that it precludes it from being covered. That's crazy.
Yeah, and we've met with the Ohio Insurance Board and then Ohio Nursing. I mean, the problem is that we have these institutions like the Ohio Board of Nursing, and then we come out with we have a chronic disease self-management course that they will accept. We have a diabetes disease course or diabetes specific community health workers, and they will accept that. We have the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America came out with a community health worker training that focuses solely on sickle cell. The nursing board has been fighting us for 5 years to get that accreditation so that a person who has it in the state of Ohio can get any other job. They refuse to certify that course. And when you look at who runs the nursing association and you look at the officers, you know why. That's why we have a Black Nurse Association. That's why we have a Hispanic Nurse Association, because we have these racist types of structures that if you don't look like us and saying and it's not going to benefit us, we don't care about it. And so when we talk to the insurance companies about policies, I mean, you have people that have sickle cell disease that work, that function, I mean, that get retirement, that don't have many crises. I think the young sister said it, there's 3 people in that house, they're different. Yet, if they have a diagnosis for sickle cell, if you're not working, you can't get a policy.
Yep.
And they just say, forget it. We're not giving you a life insurance policy. Now, if you
I
work,
mean, and I think that that's across the state. I mean, across the country, because I'm from Michigan, and I live in Texas, and I can tell you that as a warrior myself, I have been trying to get a life insurance policy since I was about 20 years old, and that was on my own accord, and I've never been able to get one. And my husband and I picked up again once we got married to see if I could potentially get one. And I've actually had people out there look for me and go to the ends of the earth to try to find one. So for the person who asked me the questions, getting a life insurance policy. So you can't get a life insurance policy with sickle cell. They do have policies that are considered burial policies. So what that does is you would pay into that. And what would happen is upon your warrior's death or your death, if you are the warrior, it would cover like the funeral expenses and like all of that background stuff. But there's no additional money coming, right? There's no additional help. There's no helpmate. I have life insurance through my husband's job because I am an independent worker and I work for myself. I have my own little company. I'm a photographer, so I can't go out and buy life insurance for myself. I do have it through my husband's company. Whenever I worked, when I did work in corporate America, I did have health insurance through my jobs. But I have never had independent health insurance. It's something that back in the day, there are warriors out there who are my age or older, whose parents bought them life insurance when they were brand new babies before they got their official diagnosis. So that's a very smart tactic for all these new parents. If you have a child with sickle cell, before they get anything back, you go and buy them a life insurance policy immediately, as soon as they're born. You don't get the blood test back. You don't need to know nothing. I know nothing, and get that life insurance policy. And that will carry your child over for their entire life. My son has a life insurance policy on him that we got right when he was born. However, we did know that he was just a carrier and he did not have sickle cell. That was definitely a selling point. But yes, you cannot get life insurance as a sickle cell warrior, at least not in the United States.
Well, you can, and I'm going to tell everybody who's listening. It's called.
Oh, you can. Life. I've never heard of it.
It's called borrowed life. What you have to do is just one of the things that you just said about getting the policy when they're born, through Gerber or whatever. But now you can, we talked about it last night at one of the meetings. You can get a policy, and then you have to find a carrier who's an independent carrier, because if they work for a corporate office, no. But if it's an independent insurance agency, they can insure you. Now, I do know a handful of folk that have that type of insurance. It's called a borrowed life, and I'm going to do more research, and then I'm going to present that to. But what our goal is to have the insurance agencies who are the top 4 that we're targeting to say, you know what, this is not fair, because there are some children who are born with genetic disorders that do not manifest themselves until they're in their double digits. They have life insurance policies, like, Duchenne's, other things that don't manifest themselves until they get a little older. They're born with it, but it doesn't kind of get to the point where it is now. They have life insurance policies. So if it's a genetic disorder, it doesn't matter as long as that family is paying into that policy, whether it's a face value policy, because the young man that we just buried, I think he was 50 here, he had an insurance policy, and it was just a face value. There's just, this is what the policy is. It's none of that. It's not term. It's not any of that. And that insurance policy paid out, and he had an insurance policy. So I know that you can get a policy, but it's just a limited amount. It's not going to be $1 million. It's not going to be all of that. It's going to be, this is what you get. You got a $10,000 policy, a $20,000 policy, it has to be a set amount, and you can get that.
Yeah, that's good to know. It's sad that we are limited in receiving those funds, because typically, not to be funny, that's typically how individuals that are not in our community create generational wealth for their
generational wealth. Yeah.
So that we just keep putting ourselves in these situations, or society puts us in these situations to where we cannot progress. So I host a lot of these talks so that we can figure out ways that we can advocate, or how do we, and this is what I posed to you guys earlier. How do we how do we get legislators to become more involved to create that change, or to put certain things in place for us to do so? We have an audience member says that they believe that Western Southern Life will ensure patients with sickle cell disease.
Yeah, that's one of the policies.
Well, and there's something that I want to add to that, because herein lies the issue, right? We put out these mass things that they will insure you, but you got to understand. I want everyone to know, when you're 40 or older, and you have had acute chest syndrome and pneumonia and avascular necrosis and or a stroke and or pulmonary embolisms or DVTs, that a lot of those things will literally take you out of the running for life insurance because of those things. So it's not always, oh no, it's no sickle cell. It's also dependent on age and health, and you had this, you spent some time we see you spent some time in the ICU here. So all those other factors add up to being able to get life insurance, which is why when I was 20, I was trying to get it then, because I was healthier and I hadn't gone through it. My body hadn't been through a lot of trauma, but as I've aged, trauma happens. And so just something to remember, that it's not like a blanket statement for anyone. The reason why I am not coverable, I don't ever say anything with definitives, because sickle cell isn't a definitive disease. It's not like everyone, like I said, it's not everyone's isn't the same. So just letting everyone know, there are some disqualifiers that lie even in people who accept patients with sickle cell.
Oh yeah, I mean, if I was trying, some people I know, they're trying to get a policy. They had high blood pressure, and it was like, we're gonna raise your deductible, we're gonna raise your premium. So it's a lot of disqualifiers. But hopefully, what we're trying to say is, if you want to put a policy on your children, and then if you're healthy and there's nothing wrong with you, you just have to double down and add more money to your policy. You got parents, you get an insurance policy, you make that child a beneficiary, you set some trust aside, and you have those different things in place, because we don't, and that's another whole subject, about finances. I mean, in our, my parents and my grandparents, they had a policy on everybody. You can get a policy on the boy next door. I mean, the insurance man would come by, and as long as you pay the policy, they come with the little book, Mr. Willie, Mr. Jones, Mr. Smith, and they put your little envelope and you write it up, and you didn't know who had a policy on. You died, and 14 people cashing in because they paid for the policy. So, they were all about insurance. $1 a week, $10. They were about paying those policies. And it was just like, hey, something happened, at least we can, and it's something, that we don't talk about, but we've always talked about that. You have to settle the issue. We live, we die. It's not, you have to get that issue taken care of, and then you live your life and deal, but you got to get that taken care of. So we've always been an insurance family. I mean, I think everybody in my family has insurance, except some of them new people. It's like, I don't think y'all related because y'all don't understand the concept. We don't do GoFundMe. We don't do chicken dinners, and we don't do that. So when you're born, you get a policy, and then, you move on. And that's kind of the way that we need to start thinking about making sure that our children are covered. Because, you could leave before your child leaves. Then what? Somebody has to have some money tied. There has to be some financial things set aside. My sister went to work one day and didn't come back. And, she was less than 40. And it was just like, what? So you never know. And I'm raising her 2 children. So it's like insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a question from one of our audience members. They're asking, what if a person has a job and they're given a payout to leave this job because of sickle cell? They're asking, is this legal?
Well, I just been going through this with one of the high people, one of the high companies in Cleveland. Transportation system illegal. So illegal. They can't fire you because you have sickle cell disease.
Yeah.
But if they're, and this is horrible, they cannot fire you for sickle cell, but if you are not able to do the work and there's not accommodations, that might be why they're talking about a payoff or payout. I call it a payoff because it really is a payoff.
It's a payoff, yeah.
Payoff. I didn't, even though I said, so I don't know. I mean, on its face, you're right. You're right that you cannot be fired for discrimination, and that would be a discrimination based upon how, but the other question is, under like for workers' comp or unemployment comp, are you able to do the work? And they should be able to, and if they cannot find accommodations. So it's not necessarily that, whether you would be successful if you sue them. But at the very beginning, the first premise is that that's not legal to do.
Yeah, I mean, so like you said, if they can't perform the work, and there's different, guidelines in that, and then, we have an at-will state, but
Yeah.
they can't fire you just because they find out you have sickle cell.
Right.
Because, again, it's not contagious. We've had an employer who thought sickle cell was contagious and found out a person had sickle cell and tried to fire them. And so that's illegal. We have places where there's a woman that I know that has sickle cell that has worked for a company for 45 years, been a faithful employee. And because she now asking for accommodations,
right?
Now they want to get rid. But I mean, so her sickle cell has never been an issue until she, she's gotten older. And so, she wants some different accommodations for the comorbidities that come along with that. But she's been a faithful employee for 45 years. So, there's and everybody's different. I know, everybody's different.
We also know that a lot of patients do not disclose until they're technically on the job. And we know why that is, because the stigmas that come behind it. And they don't want to be prejudged prior to doing these jobs in most cases. So I get it on one end, but then I also understand from the sickle cell warriors' perspective as well. They want to have some normalization in their life, and if you're always under scrutiny or someone is always, saying what you can't do because of your condition, sometimes that's a little, I would assume that's a little, disheartening for them.
Well, I could speak to that a little bit about discriminatory practices. I've been there. I've been there, done that. Like I said, I worked in corporate America until I was about 35. And I worked 3 jobs all the time at the same time, because apparently I have a thing about working a lot of jobs. And I have seen it all. I've heard it all. And, it's funny. Before I moved to Texas, I was all about informing my employer, I'm out because I have sickle cell. And I never told them, of course, not prior to the interview process. Didn't tell them during the interview process. Didn't tell them after I was hired. They didn't find out until that first time I had to go to the hospital and miss a week worth of work. And then it was, I would always try to make it that 90 days or whatever that that term period is. I'm like, we're going to figure. I would create plans with my hematologist. Like, if we need to do infusions and we need to get, we need to figure out a system to keep me as healthy as possible under the guise that I am like this little healthy person until the gloves can come off and I can be my real self, and oops, I got to take a week, so I did all of those things. And then once I moved here to Texas, I didn't tell at all. I didn't disclose at all. I was like, I'm not telling nobody, nothing. It ain't none of your business. If I have to go, I'll go, but I'm not telling anyone. And no one ever knew. And it's funny because I actually did the Dr. Phil show while I was working at this big company. It's a very big company. And I was working for this really massive employer. And I didn't tell them that I had sickle cell, but I went on Dr. Phil to talk about sickle cell, which was ironic, right? That I would go put myself out on this public forum when I don't want anyone at my job to know. And I told my boss in secret, I said, hey, I got asked to be on Dr. Phil's show. She asked me why. And I didn't tell her. I just said, there is something that I'm an expert in that they asked me to come and speak on. I kind of left it at that. And so she told the entire team, oh, Heather's going to be on Dr. Phil. And I was like, and so everyone for about like 6 months or so, people kept saying, when's the air date? I was like, I don't know. It had aired. It had been on until nothing. And I kept it a secret. And it really wasn't until probably the last week or so where people came over to me. There were people who I had worked with for, 3 years. And they said, I saw the episode. And I was like, yeah. They're like, pretty cool. They were like, that's you? I said, yeah, that's me. You didn't tell anyone. And I said, nope, was never going to tell any of y'all. And the reason why was because I didn't want to be treated differently. I didn't want people to think that I wasn't doing or couldn't do something. And I still feel that, though, even as an independent patient advocate and working as a photographer on my own business, I still feel that I have to get the work done. I have to do the work. And I think there are a lot of warriors out there who feel very similarly to that we want to get the work done. There's too much work that has to be done. And many of us are so passionate. All of you here, I'm sure, Black women, we have a problem with like, let's get it done. I have a cousin who works for someone in Detroit who is a very prominent person, and his entire team is Black women. And she's like, we could run the world. She says it to us all the time. Y'all could run the world. And it's true. As a Black woman, we have this desire to get the work done without griping and without complaining. We just do the job because it needs to get done. And I think that it's profound. And as a warrior, I think it's amplified.
Definitely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
Yes. So I know we went over just a little bit, but I could probably talk to you guys all day about all the issues going on in sickle cell. But what I would like for each of you to leave my audience with, Heather, from you, I would like for you to talk to our warriors, leave them with a piece of advice on how they can continue to thrive and survive and do all the things that they want to do, because obviously you're doing it. So in your own way, and it's not to be in comparison, but just some positive. I like to leave on a positive note. And then from you, Senator Hicks, what ways she went out. Okay, she'll come back. So from you, Annie, I would like for you to tell our warriors, especially here in the Ohio area, how they can get involved, whether they're warriors, not warriors, a friend of a warrior, whatever, how they're able to get involved. Hold on. And then for you, Senator Hicks, I would like for you to leave us with a piece of advice on how we can work with you, or how people can reach out to you, or your office, on how you can support the warriors here in this area. So I'll start with you, Heather.
Well, to all the warriors who are watching today, I want you to know that life is full of hope. It's full of joy, but you have to go out and seek it just like everyone else. I want to understand that you give yourself and allow yourself the grace that you need to be a warrior and still do what you want, because your dreams are reachable. Everything that you have in you can come outside of you, and you can show everyone your light. Remember that sickle cell is tough, and it can be dark, and it can be damning, and we can get so down on ourselves. But let me tell you that there is a light inside of you that can shine bright for everyone else. And when people see that, not only are you showing your strength, you're showing your ability to grow, to love, and be a human. And we all are human. So I just want to say that sickle cell isn't the end of it. It is the beginning. And it's what you do with that beginning that's going to redirect the course of your life.
Love it.
That was beautiful.
That is.
Beautiful.
You
As
and
an advocate, I'm going to leave you with 3 quotes. Shirley Chisholm said, if they don't invite you to the table, you bring a folding chair. Elizabeth Warren said, if you're not seated at the table, you're probably on the menu. And Barack Obama said, it's not enough just to sit at the table, but sit at the head of the table. We have to be involved. We can no longer sit by while everybody's discussing us, not including us, not speaking to us, and not asking us. This group of people that's on this, I don't own the sickle cell space, but we leave that to the warriors, and then they have their individual story. But if we're not involved, if we're not going to the meetings, if we don't know what's on the menu, if we don't know what they're talking about, we are sitting aside and letting someone else decide our fate on a daily basis.
Yes.
And we can
Yes.
no longer sit by and stand idle
Yes.
and allow that.
Yes.
yes.
Wow. I am encouraged. I'm not going to lie to you. I am encouraged. This has been a tough week for me personally at the Senate, in the Senate, because of some of the stuff that is not necessarily this topic, but really impacts all of the things that we're talking about. And whether it's about sickle cell, or it's about voting, or it's about babies, or it's about guns, you've got to be engaged. You've got to reach out. And when your legislator or your elected official doesn't return the call, doesn't acknowledge, then you send an email, you don't get a response, send another one. If you don't get a response, send a letter. If you don't get that response, call the office. If you don't get a response, show up at the office, whether it's the office locally or the office in Columbus or DC or at your city, wherever it is, show up. And if they don't show up, if you don't get a response from that time, show up at committee, show up in session, just be there. When I was on city council, there was a lady who came to city council every other Tuesday. She came every Tuesday, whether it was for council or for the agenda. She was there, and members of city council always wondered, why is this lady there? She doesn't say anything or anything. So I finally spoke to her, and it is because she said she wanted to know. She didn't want someone to tell her. She wanted to know for herself. And because she was there, she got, we acted a different kind of way because she was in the room. Because not only did she come in, she also would leave and tell somebody about what the city council was doing, not waiting for the TVs to do it or the reporters or what have you. But it's so important that you engage us. You can reach my office. The email, which is the best way to do it, is my last name, Hicks-Hudson @ohiosenate.gov. And you can Google me on the Ohio legislative page. But either way it goes, that is how you can get stuff to me on what's called the official side. I think Lachey has my campaign /public Facebook, email, whatever it's called. But stay in touch. If you don't hear anything, remember we're like that bouncing ball that goes in a million different directions. But this has been so helpful for me. And I'm going to continue this conversation. I'm sorry about my dog in the background, but he thinks he runs this house.
So yes, I have put all of their following information. And Heather, I believe, is this where you want people to follow you on Instagram? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So I have Annie J. Ross-Womack. You can follow at Ohio Sickle Cell and Health Association, or on Twitter, OSCHA 3. Heather Avant, you can follow her at HEATH_AVANT. And Senator Paula Hicks-Hudson, her Facebook page is Paula Hicks-Hudson for Ohio Senate District 11. I'm going to leave that up there for a second. As I told you guys, tonight's talk was in collaboration with Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. Good Health Wins, as we focus on the importance of immunization. I wanted to end this by saying this is still flu season. So if you have not gotten your flu shot, go get it. I just got over something. I don't know what took me out, but it took me out. So I'm here to say it is still flu season. Go ahead, get your flu shot. Contact your local health department or your doctor for that. And next week, Advocacy Through Entrepreneurship, we will have Tristan Lee, who's a sickle cell warrior. Heather, you probably know who that is. He's a sickle cell warrior as well as a fashion artist. We also have Tiana Wolford, sickle cell warrior and co-founder and CEO of Sickle Cell Reproductive Health Education Directive. So they will be here on Monday, April 24th at 6 p.m., same place. And I look forward to seeing you all join us and asking questions. And once again, I thank my panel tonight for coming. I appreciate all three of you ladies for just taking this initiative to come on a call and talk to my audience about things that we should be privy to. And I hope that someone that was watching tonight learned something new, and that they're going to be willing to get a part of some of these support groups, advocate for patients living with sickle cell. You do not have to be a person living with sickle cell to be involved or engaged. We would appreciate individuals that are not, so that we can have more hands on deck, especially when our warriors are not feeling 100% themselves. So with that being said, everyone have a good night, and I will see you guys on Monday.